Welcome everyone to this session called Your Guide to Becoming an Australian Behaviour Analyst. My name is Kristen Bailey. I'm a BCBA and speech pathologist, as well as being a certified behaviour analyst. Unfortunately, my colleague Melanie, who also works with me at Launch Supervision, was unable to make it tonight. She does send her apologies. So let's get started. Just to give you a little bit of context, as I mentioned at the start, I am a BCBA. I have been working in behavior support, working with individuals with complex behaviors of concern all the way since 1998. Yes, a long time, over 25 years now. I have been in Australia since 2007 and qualified as an Australian speech pathologist. I'm duly certified as a speech pathologist behavior support practitioner. I had the opportunity to set up a postgraduate program at Griffith University and worked there for a few years, and then decided that although I absolutely love teaching at the university level, I was really passionate about providing supervision and having more of a longer term and more in-depth interaction and relationship with the people that I was supporting to come into this field. So that was the birth of Launch Supervision. And what we do at Launch Supervision is we work alongside aspiring behavior analysts and behavior support practitioners to help them build their skills and thrive. I've been doing this for a little while. Melanie, who is my colleague, has also been doing this for quite some time, working in behavior support in Australia. We both have worked in the academic realm as well. So we've got a really strong knowledge of the content that you'd need to have for the behavior analysis certification, but also the experience under behavior support. We believe in collaboration and working together. Everything that we do, we work closely with the supervisees that we support and make sure that we're maintaining evidence-based and respectful practice. We do prioritize neuroaffirming practice, empowerment, respect, and strategies that are also grounded in science. And we do at Launch, we have one-to-one supervision and mentoring. We offer group supervision, resources, webinars, education, tools, and then support for certification pathways under the BACB and ABAA. So that's a little bit about us. So we've been doing this a while, and what we were finding when we were teaching in the university course is that often students would start their coursework and not have any idea about the pathway to becoming a behavior analyst. It's all a little bit overwhelming and a little bit confusing, to be honest. I know that because there's both behavior analyst and behavior support practitioner here in Australia, and then for a while we had a different certification that was managed overseas, it became a little bit confusing. So I'm happy to cut through all of that and clear this up for you with this session. So our learning objectives, what we're going to achieve tonight is really, I want to answer the question, what can a degree in behavior analysis offer you? And those of you who are behavior support practitioners who may be already working in the behavior support practitioner space, I want to talk to you a little bit about what benefits a degree in behavior analysis can bring, and also why you should consider certification in behavior analysis. So not only having the degree, but then going ahead and going for that certification pathway. And then once you've decided to become a behavior analyst, what are the pathways to actually doing so? How you go about it, I'll give you a nice step-by-step breakdown. There's a couple of certification pathways that we'll talk about here that are available to you here in Australia. And then finally, we'll talk about the supervision requirements. And again, there's a few things that you've got to think about when you're looking for certification, and the supervision is one piece of this. And I really want to make sure that we are educating and empowering supervisees to know what good supervision should be, knows what it should look like. And we do hear some stories of some not so great supervision out there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of supervisees that need supervision and not as many supervisors. So unfortunately, that does mean that sometimes maybe not the best practice continues to get reinforced and the supervisors continue to perpetuate not so great practice. Okay, so we're going to talk about this process through a bit of a case. So I've created Beth. Beth is at a bit of a crossroads with what to do for her career. She's graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology in 2022. During her degree, she did a bit of work as a behavior therapist, supporting young autistic children. Following graduation, Beth has been working as a disability support worker for the past 9 months. She's very interested in behavioral sciences and would like to pursue a career in this area, but she's really confused about which path to take and what she needs to get there. So Beth is a bit of a amalgamation of all the different people, all the different supervisees that we meet at launch, the people that we talk to. So oftentimes you find someone who's really interested in making a difference. They really find a particular interest in supporting people with challenging behavior, or maybe perhaps young children who need extra support with skill development. They're really passionate about that area, but are really uncertain about that pathway. It's not the same as, say, becoming a speech pathologist or becoming an OT. Those are pretty clearly defined degree programs. Whereas coming into the behavior space, there's a few different options and the pathway isn't as clear. So let's see how we can be helping Beth. There's three broadly within the sort of behavior realm that I will focus on tonight. So at the top, we've got the behavior support practitioner, which came into being, although there were behavior support practitioners pre-NDIS, we are all becoming a lot more aware of behavior support practitioners now with NDIS. Behavior support practitioners do predominantly work under NDIS, but I will also note that there are behavior support practitioners in education, aged care settings as well as a few other settings. We also might have behavior analysts, and then we also have psychologists. Now, I have done these circles as a little bit of an overlap because we do have professionals who are both behavior support practitioners and behavior analysts. We have practitioners who are both behavior analysts and psychologists. We have practitioners who are both behavior support practitioners and psychologists, and then we have a few that are all three. And then on the outside, we have some other professionals who also might be supporting individuals with behaviors of concern that might specifically look at the allied health professionals, so someone like a speech pathologist or an occupational therapist, or those medical professionals such as a psychiatrist. So for our case person, Beth, these are broadly speaking, she needs to probably choose between behavior support practitioner, behavior analyst, psychologist, or some combination of those. Let's talk about first what a behavior support practitioner is. So really a behavior support practitioner are those practitioners predominantly, like I mentioned, working under the NDIS. The credentialing process for a behavior support practitioner is registration through the NDIS or the Quality and Safeguards Commission. And this is by a demonstration of minimum capabilities, which I will talk through in just a second. The education requirements, there really is no stipulated education requirement minimum, but it is likely to be at least a bachelor degree. That being said, I have heard of practitioners who have been successful at becoming registered practitioners who haven't had a bachelor's degree. In terms of experience required, again, there's no minimum. However, increasingly, we're starting to see that the requirements for experience, demonstrated experience, are increasing. In terms of scope of practice, this is really general, but broadly, we're going to be looking at assessment and planning for behaviors of concern as the scope of practice for behavior support practitioner. And really, I should also say the number one thing a behavior support practitioner is responsible for is improving quality of life. So we really are looking at working with those individuals who are having a significant impact on their quality of life, and that is impacting on their behaviors of concern and vice versa. Behaviors of concern are impacting on their quality of life. So the behavior support practitioner's role is to get in there and create a plan to address all of that. In terms of how to become a behavior support practitioner, I'm going to cover this just by way of contrasting when we start to talk about behavior analysts. So I apologize for those of you who are in the audience who are already behavior support practitioners and are saying, oh, I already know this. There might be a few of you who aren't. So I thought I wanted to cover this just so that I could contrast it with the approach to being the pathway to becoming a behavior analyst. So the way that we become behavior support practitioners is through a process of self-assessment, followed by endorsement by a proficient or above supervisor. So they do have a bit of a hierarchy within the NDIS of the registration levels for behavior support practitioners. So in this diagram, it illustrates it. They have it at the top. So the top level, although the sort of most entry level practitioner is a core practitioner. Then you have a proficient practitioner. And then on equal standing, you have an advanced and a specialist practitioner. And I'll go through specifically what those terms mean. But the idea here is if you're looking for a supervisor as a behavior support practitioner, you're looking for someone who has been assessed at proficient or above. So proficient, advanced, or specialist. How you go through this process is that you need to demonstrate that you meet capabilities expected of a behavior support practitioner through a blend of education and professional development, as demonstrated through completion certificates, degrees, etc. Work experience or portfolio, being able to demonstrate that you have the knowledge and skills necessary to be a behavior support practitioner at the level that you wish to be endorsed at, and also showing a commitment to ongoing supervision. The capabilities that you need to demonstrate have been established through the Positive Behavior Support Capability Framework, which was developed in 2019. The latest update that I know about is 2021. There may be a more recent update, but as far as I know, that is the most recent one. The way that the PBS capability framework is laid out, I won't go into too much detail. There's heaps of information online to give you an idea, but broadly speaking, this capability framework is divided into 7 domains, and those domains follow the process that you might undertake when supporting a person with a behavior of concern. So if you can imagine that you have a person with a behavior of concern, or someone who's engaging in some dangerous behavior, potentially might be dangerous to others or to themselves, the first thing we need to do is get in there with an interim response. We need to have a plan to keep that person and those around them safe. Followed by, once we've addressed those safety concerns, we can then go in with a functional behavior assessment to understand that behavior of concern, to be able to provide longer term supports. We then develop a behavior support plan. We need to implement that plan. And by implementation, we mean training all the stakeholders around that person to be able to support that person with the plan. We need to evaluate that plan through monitoring and data collection. Always, we need to be thinking about reducing and eliminating restrictive practices. And then our final domain is continuing professional development and supervision, which is a process or something we should consider throughout the process of becoming a behavior support practitioner. Even I am a specialist behavior support practitioner. Even I still access supervision, and the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission is very clear that ongoing supervision is expected no matter what level you are at. What is a capability is a question that comes up. So there are quite a few of them, but basically the definition of a capability is the combination of knowledge, skills, and values that a behavior support practitioner must possess to deliver high quality, person-centered, human rights-focused positive behavior support services. They are organized across those 7 levels that I talked to you before about, and then again across the different registration levels. Core practitioners have 102 capabilities. Proficient practitioners have, it's 102, so you need to meet the requirement of core, but then have an additional 88. For advanced, you need to meet the requirements of the previous 2 levels and then another 8 capabilities. And then at specialist, there's no additional capabilities, but you do need to identify a specialist area that you're able to submit evidence to demonstrate. For example, my specialist area is augmentative and alternative communication, which I demonstrated because of my work and experience as a speech pathologist. Okay, so now, if you don't have any experience, and this is often something that comes up, that you're a little bit like Beth, you want to get into this space, but hey, you don't have any experience. And if you don't have any experience, you can't actually get a job, because most jobs that are out there really want someone who is already a registered behavior support practitioner. The NDIS has created a pathway. They call this the alternative assessment pathway to suitability. That's been created to give new practitioners an opportunity to gain experience to develop their portfolio. If you go through this pathway, what you must do is submit a CV and any relevant qualifications that you think support your application. You need to submit a signed supervision agreement with an eligible supervisor, and you need to submit a professional development plan. You also need to complete an entry-level practitioner declaration form. You submit all of this, enter it through the portal, your application is considered, and then you are then deemed suitable by the Quality and Safeguards Commission, and you are given 12 months to gather your evidence to support suitability at the core level. So this is before the core level. This is how you're trying to attain that core level. And basically this gives you suitability so that you can then work with individuals who have behaviors of concern, so you have the opportunity to then develop your evidence and develop your portfolio. Okay, So that's behavior support practitioner background. And the reason, again, like I said, I wanted to contrast that and make sure that we're all on even footing when I'm now going to shift and talk about becoming a behavior analyst. Why should I consider ongoing education? Why should I consider a course? Why should I consider certification? The reasons are varied for this. I think, although there is no set education or certification requirement at the moment for behavior support practitioners, it does help to have that recognized qualification. So if you are able to identify as either a psychologist or allied health or as a behavior analyst, it does help you in the job market and just be able to continue to develop your skill set. The NDIS capability framework, it does highlight the importance of specialized knowledge and skills. And as a behavior analyst, you are developing your skill set against that capability framework as well. A lot of the focus around being a behavior support practitioner, I've observed, can focus a lot around the authorization of restrictive practices. And now, don't get me wrong, this is really important. It's important that we are making sure that we're reducing restrictive practices, that we have full visibility when it comes to prescribing restrictive practices, and that we're thinking really carefully about having to do that. However, that's not the sum total of being a behavior support practitioner. Way more, in my opinion, important is everything that comes before you have to put a restrictive practice in place. So if we're doing really excellent skill building, if we're really evaluating environments and addressing environments of concern, if we are really looking at those antecedent strategies, we don't need to necessarily, hopefully, that's the ticket to being able to reduce those restrictive practices over the longer term. So really, my feeling is that a really strong background in good skills of teaching, which is what behavior analysis is, really helps you be able to tackle that and be proactive and avoid having to prescribe restrictive practices. Developing that deep expertise certification, it's not just about a tick box, it's really building your knowledge, your skills, building your awareness of the evidence base behind what it is that we do, why we do what we do, and making sure that we can confidently meet and exceed registration requirements. We also don't know what's going to happen. At the moment, there's no minimum standard for education, there's no certification, but we don't know what will happen in the future with behavior support practitioners. I suspect that we may move to a place of regulation. So I'm thinking that potentially a degree in behavior analysis would help future-proof your career. So making sure that should the requirements change, that you would be able to continue your practice as a behavior support practitioner. And finally, potentially one of my favorite reasons is that as it stands, behavior support practitioners don't have an ethics code to work under unless you have an additional certification such as psychology or OT or behavior analysis. So it really does help to have that additional qualification to have an ethics code to abide by and some professional standards as well. Yes, I do really value my ethics code. I have two of them that I need. Actually, I have three because I have my speech pathology and then the two behavior analysis ones. I really value having those ethics codes just as a bit of a compass guiding me when I have to make some tough decisions because they do come up. Let's talk about how to become a behavior analyst. So becoming a behavior analyst, in terms of the credentialing process, it is a combination of coursework, practicum, competency, and knowledge-based requirements. Now, I have put exam in brackets. There isn't an exam for all of the certifications. Most notably, the Australian certification, as it stands right now, does not have an exam requirement. However, it does not mean that there isn't still a knowledge base requirement. You are still going to be expected to demonstrate knowledge of all of the items on the competency list under ABAA. The education required, you need a master's degree if you're looking for that BCBA, CBA, QBA, IBA levels. Sorry, I didn't talk about what QBA and IBA is. These are two international certifications that are available. We don't see too many of them in Australia because Australia has commenced the process of developing our own certification. You need a bachelor's degree for BCBA or CBAU, and the minimum number of hours in behavior analytic coursework is 315. So you need to have 315 hours of coursework. The experience required this is where your supervision comes into play. So for your BCBA, QBA, IBA, it's 2,000 hours. For CBA, it's 1,500 hours. For BCABA, 1,300 hours, and for CBAU, it's 1,000 hours. And we'll talk about these again a little bit in a little bit more detail. So let's talk a little bit about BCBA. So BCBA, BCABA certification. I used to, when I did the first run of this talk, I started a couple of years ago. I used to talk about BCBA certification first, and then CBA certification was just starting at the time. So I talked about that second. I've now completely reversed. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about BCBA certification because, to be honest, the deadline to attaining your BCBA is dwindling. It is still possible. Those of you who are listening who would like to obtain your BCBA certification, it is still possible. For context, so really my first certification and really the only certification for behavior analysts for a long time was run through the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, which was based in the US. They managed all the behavior analytic professionals globally for a long time. Then in 2019, they decided that it was too hard to manage a global certification, which is very understandable, but it caused a bit of a shock throughout the community. And we all needed to quickly mobilize to figure out, those of us who were working internationally, what we were going to do. So they basically decided they would be phasing out support for certifications outside of the US. They decided subsequent to that Australian residents would remain eligible for BACB certification until December 2026. Those of you who are looking at supervision pathway, you have until December 2026 to meet all of your supervision requirements if you'd still like to obtain the BACB certification or the BCBA certification. I'll talk about timelines for supervision in a little bit to give you some idea of how that will work and how that will play out when, yes, whether the timelines sort of fit. So as a result of the BACB changing their stance on supporting global certification, they basically tasked all of the national peak bodies to set up their own means of certification. And ABA Australia, or Association for Behavior Analysis Australia, took this on and they set up a Certified Behavior Analyst certification and also a Certified Behavior Analyst undergraduate certification. They commenced offering this certification in July 2022, and this, as I said, was in response to the changes from the BACB. The way that certification works under this scheme is that it's professional self-regulation. Basically, that means we as certified practitioners manage our own continuing education, and we submit an application and we pay a fee each year to retain that certification. But we're responsible for, as a body, as a group, we're responsible for regulating ourselves. There's no sort of, although there's a complaints process and there are processes for disciplinary, it's not the same as the certification body that is in the US, the BACB. It does allow for an entry-level standard for behavior analysis. So there is a competency list, which is equivalent to the task list from the BACB. It allows for code of ethics, yay, and a complaint system as well. And it does set the standards for continuing professional development. Okay, so those are our two broad sort of streams that I'm going to focus on. I won't focus on the QBA and the IBA because I am not certified. I don't know a lot about them. I don't even know if I know anybody who has those certifications. So I apologize if you were just dying to know about the IBA or the QBA. But get in touch if you are. I'm happy to point you in the direction of some resources if you need to. Okay, so where do behavior analysts work anyway? Look, the qualification's been around a lot longer in other parts of the world, for example, the US. And so really the application of behavior analysis has seeped into many areas of life. So there's a much broader sort of scope globally. In Australia, where do I see behavior analysts? Typically, most of our BCBAs, CBAs are working in assessment and planning for behaviors of concern. So they're behavior support practitioners. There are also, the second level is early intervention for autism. I would say this has actually swapped quite a lot in the past maybe 2 to 3 years. It used to be that most of us worked in early intervention and then only a small portion of us worked in behavior support, but I think that is now swapping, although I actually don't have the data to confirm that, so please take that with a grain of salt. There are some of us working in education and in schools as well. In Victoria, for example, there are some CBAs, BCBAs that are actually employed by the schools down there. Other times there are behavior analytic professionals that are working as teachers who have done coursework that are very keen to then go ahead and get their certification. So we have a number of supervisees that are actively working in schools, and so we're supporting them in those settings. Some subspecialties that are emerging very excitingly. I have a very good friend and colleague who has just launched her business in fitness and health promotion. So absolutely nothing to do with disability at all. She's completely changing her scope and moving into fitness and health promotion, which is really great. Also behavioral pediatrics. So these are people who work specifically with particular pediatric disorders. So things like eating disorders, feeding disorders, sleep disorders, or toileting. And as you can see, globally, we're everywhere. Literacy intervention, organizational behavior management, environmental sustainability is a massive growing area. And it's one that I suspect we'll start to see here in Australia, if not already, and I'm just not aware of it. Substance abuse, clinical behavior analysis, brain injury, behavioral gerontology is also another emerging area. And again, I suspect we will start to see this one very soon in Australia as well. And then behavioral pediatrics and public health. Okay, so our task list. There's two different names for this. Basically, it's the list of the information that you need to know to become a behavior analyst. So the BACB calls this the task list. The ABAA calls this the competency list. Broadly speaking, so this one is the BACB one as an example. The ABAA one follows broadly in the same sort of lines. So basically what you're covering is philosophic underpinning. So you're trying to explore the science underpinning behavior analysis. You're understanding the foundational principles and why it all works. Concepts and principles, you want to understand the core concepts. So things like reinforcement, understanding motivating operations, and stimulus control. Those of you who are new to this have no idea what those terms mean, but these are all the core, really critical concepts to being able to affect behavior change, particularly around developing skills, measurement, data display, and interpretation. So here we're really thinking about measuring what it is that we do, being able to demonstrate that what we do works, being able to show graphs and be able to demonstrate to funders and to parents and to stakeholders, hey, look, we all work together, we put this intervention into place, and look at the change that has happened. Just magic. Experimental design, understanding how to design interventions that isolate variables and be able to, so that we can demonstrate that what is changing, that the behavior change is down to the things that we are doing and not to other sorts of variables. Ethics, really getting confident in navigating complex ethical dilemmas. Behavior assessment, really understanding the deeper why of behavior, really understanding why we do what we do. And then behavior change, understanding, and how can we build that understanding of why we do what we do into coming up with some interventions, evidence-based techniques to teach new skills and reduce behaviors of concern. We've got selecting interventions. So we have lots of choice for which direction we can go in with selecting interventions, how we can choose strategies that are going to suit that person the best, really how we go about choosing. There's lots of options but there are a number of things that we need to be thinking about when we choose our pathway. And that area really helps us to hone that skill. And then finally, personnel supervision and management, which is applying our science, the understanding of behavior change to the people that we're working with, not just the participants, but the people around the participants, so that if we can effectively change their behaviors, that's changing the environment of the participant, and we can get some pretty great outcomes for that participant. So being able to use things like behavior skills training to teach new skills and help with implementation of behavior support plans. Let's go back to Beth. Beth decides that she really wants to pursue certification as a behavior analyst. She does want to work independently, so she wants to think about those top level, so the BCBA or the CBA certifications. And the BCABA, those do need to be supervised. So you need to have an external supervisor. Technically, you cannot be working independently. You have to have ongoing supervision for those if you have that certification. Now, of course, ongoing supervision is good for everyone. Beth really likes working with children, so she does enjoy early intervention, but she actually really likes working with school-age kids and adolescents, and particularly those with behaviors of concern. And she does want to have the option to register with the NDIS as a behavior support practitioner. So let's look at these qualifications side by side and help Beth out, try and figure out where she wants to go next. As I mentioned, the certifications that are going to be the best options for Beth if she wants to practice independently are going to be the CBA and the BCBA certification. So those are both ticks for practicing independently. The CBAU and the BCABA require ongoing supervision. The QABA and the IBA, by the by, also you could practice independently. Recognized outside of Australia. This is a critical one. So at the moment, it's just the BCBA of the qualifications that are popular in Australia. It's the BCBA and the BCABA that are recognized outside of Australia. Now, keeping in mind, this probably will change so that in the coming years, probably the only place the BCBA and the BCABA certification will be formally recognized will be in the US. The QBA and the IBA are also recognized in some areas. Again, not globally, not universally, but are recognized in some areas as well. At the moment, CBA and CBAU are not recognized outside of Australia. But again, that may change. Let's hope. Reciprocal recognition. So what I mean by this is if you attain one qualification, do you automatically get another qualification? So the only one that works this way is if you get a BCBA. So if you get a BCBA, you are able to also apply for your CBA, your QBA, and your IBA. Similarly for your BCABA. The other ones don't work that way. So you can't get a CBA and then qualify for a QBA. You can't get a QBA, qualify for a CBA, and you can't get either of those and qualify for BCBA. If you want to do one and then get the others, that would be the BCBA is going to be your option. However, if you're planning on staying in Australia and you just want a really good Australian qualification, then the CBA is your pathway. I've put a bunch of question marks recognized by the NDIS. We're going to come back to this. This is a complex issue that I'm going to talk you through a little bit. We know that the QBA is not recognized by the NDIS at the moment. And then exam. So for the CBA and the CBAU, those do not currently have an exam. I will note that could change and it is likely to change at that deadline, so December 2026. I have a feeling, again, no evidence, nothing written down. I have a feeling there will be an exam coming into place around that time as well. But at the moment, there's no exam for CBA or CBAU. There is an exam for BCBA and BCABA. The NDIS. Are behavior analytic professionals recognized by the NDIS? Now, there's two sides to this coin. I'll talk you through this. On the yes side, there are numerous reports that have been commissioned by the NDIS that mention behavior analysis. For example, that PBS capability framework that I showed you before clearly states on page 5, I think, it's either 5 or 7, behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis. There's also reports that specifically were commissioned by the NDIS to evaluate effective interventions, particularly for young autistic people, young autistic children. Those reports do recognize applied behavior analysis. On the no side, the NDIS schedules of support, the way that it is set up, and those of you, I'm not sure if you're across the NDIS schedule of supports and how they do all of their fees. I won't bore you too much with this, but basically there's lots and lots of different professionals listed, except for behavior analysts. We fall under the other category at the moment. So that does lend itself to a little bit of vulnerability that we are not actually a stated support at the moment. And increasingly with the new legislation, this does seem to be something that's impacting on plans coming through, particularly around early intervention and therapeutic support funding. That being said, with behavior support practitioner funding, there doesn't seem to be any issue with behavior analytic professionals being recognized. I have not yet heard of an analyst who was able to demonstrate a strong portfolio and strong evidence of their capabilities as a behavior support practitioner, heard of them being knocked back. Many behavior analysts would be acquiring a lot of that knowledge and skill set to be able to qualify them to become a behavior support practitioner. Sometimes we do get pushback from the NDIS or their partners. They will often say, no, sorry, we don't fund behavior analysis. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty that has happened. What we are seeing is definitely a shift to where behavior analysts are said, oh, no, you need to be specialist behavior support practitioners. This is what you do, not necessarily in therapeutic support or early intervention. That's not 100%. I still have lots of friends and colleagues who run practices doing early interventions, and they're still successful doing so. But there does seem to be a shift in where behavior professionals are going to be working within the NDIS. So summary of our requirements to become a behavior analyst. As I mentioned before, you need a degree, you need coursework, you need supervision, and sometimes you need an exam. Okay, let's talk about CBA first. So the numbers here are, you need a master or above, so you can have a PhD. You need at least a master's degree. You need 3 years of experience in The coursework is 270 hours. You need 1,500 hours of supervision and no exam. So there's those first three requirements. Once you meet those, you apply there's a application process through ABA Australia. And if you're approved, you will be a certified behavior analyst. CBAU is very similar, but remember the minimum degree here is a bachelor, 180 hours of coursework, 1,000 hours of supervision. With BCBA, we're looking at what's called the Pathway 2. So BCBA certification has a couple of pathways. This is the one for independent supervision. Here, the minimum degree is a master or above, 315 hours based on either the fifth or the sixth. We're in a transition period between task lists, 2,000 hours of supervision, and there is an exam. And then very similar for BCABA, you got a bachelor, 150 hours based on the fifth or sixth edition task list, 1,300 hours of supervision, and then an exam. And then we've got those QBA certifications, which are broadly similar to the CBA qualification. So we're looking at 270 hours of coursework and then 1,500 hours of supervision. Ooh, okay. Let's talk about how supervision works. So I said 1,500 hours of supervision for CBA. Now that does not mean you need to spend 1,500 hours with your supervisor. I did have someone say to me, oh my goodness, I have to pay for 1,500 hours with a supervisor. No, that's not how it works. It's 1,500 hours that you're working in a setting, and I'll talk a little bit about what that actually means. You can accrue between 20 and 130 hours per month, or it's monthly supervisory periods. So per month, essentially, you need to have at least one contact with your supervisor during that month. For CBA, at the moment, there's no requirement for observation. There was always a requirement for BCBA. I expect that there soon will be a requirement for observation with a CBA. Our policy is we will not do fieldwork supervision without being able to see you practice at least once a month. It's just not something I feel good about ethically. But technically, according to the requirements, there's no minimum. And the percentage of hours that must be supervised is 5%. So of those 1,500 hours, you need 75 hours in total that you would be spending with a supervisor. And that can either be one-to-one or it can be group supervision. So similar with the BCBA, so you've got those 2,000 hours, broadly similar. You do need to do observations with BCBA and you do need more contacts. So there's a stipulation that you need 4 contacts per supervision period. Percentage of hours supervised is 5%. Again, 2,000 hours, that's about 100 hours of direct supervision that you require. The BCBA also offers a concentrated pathway, which those people a little bit under the pump trying to get under that December 2026 deadline. If you do 10% supervision hours, that means you only need to do 1,500 hours. So it reduces that requirement a bit because you're getting a more intensive supervision, but you do need to do 6 contacts and 1 observation as well. All right, so Beth decides that she's going to go for the CBA certification. Beth's friend has put her into contact with a BCBA CBA supervisor, and Beth and the supervisor hit it off. She's ready to start her supervision. But here's the problem, Beth. Stop. You can't start your supervision until you start your coursework. Okay, so first things first, so those of you who are starting coursework in February, don't leave here and get really excited to go find a supervisor and get started with your supervision before you start your coursework. First step, coursework. Once you start, the very week that you start your coursework, you can start with your supervision. So where do you start your coursework? I'm just going to go through the master's degrees options here that are currently here in Australia. So we have the Master of Applied Behavior Analysis at Monash University. That was the first program to start. Wonderful program run by my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Aaron Leith. There's the Master of Applied Behavior Analysis at Griffith University, which is the program that I led and developed for a number of years. I'm no longer affiliated anymore, sadly, but have fond memories of being involved with that program. The other option is any other master plus a graduate certificate. So if you have a Master of OT, for example, you can just do a graduate certificate. So there's a graduate certificate option at Griffith, and that will get you meet the requirements towards becoming a CBA. There are a number of international online options. I think people are still sometimes doing these, although obviously less frequent now that we have some Australian options. Florida Institute of Technology, Ball State University, and St. Cloud State University. If I had to offer a tip, I would suggest doing an Australian option. especially if you're going to be practicing in Australia. Although those programs are wonderful, they're very much based on the American model, and there's a lot of disconnects between the American model of behavior analysis and what's happening here in Australia. So I really would encourage you to definitely consider one of the Australian universities for your program. So Beth goes back to university. She enrolls in a master's degree. She's absolutely loving it. And now she's got to tackle supervision. But she's feeling a little overwhelmed and has no idea where to get started with her supervision. So let's talk about what supervision is. There's a couple different terminologies. So the BACB refers to independent fieldwork supervision. ABAA talks about behavior analytics supervised experience with supervision, which is a mouthful. But basically what this means is you're in a setting doing behavior analytics stuff. We'll talk about that in a second. You're in regular contact with a qualified supervisor. The qualified supervisor observes your work, reviews permanent products, so documents that you produce, reports, assessments, plans, and gives you feedback and verifies that you meet the task list competencies. What is behavior analytics stuff? So basically, it's things like writing behavior plans and summary reports, designing and monitoring skill acquisition and behavior reduction programs, communicating with caregivers, training others, researching literature relevant to a client's program, implementation of therapeutic or instructional activities, conducting assessments related to behavioral intervention. Now, this is just a snapshot. There may be other activities that are also included. Predominantly, they're activities that are directly related to the task list or the competency list. And really, the final say on whether it counts is your supervisor. So your supervisor should spend some time going through helping you to do an audit of your working week to figure out which activities will fit into those buckets. A setting can be anywhere that you can do this behavior analytics stuff. So most popular or common at the moment is positive behavior support settings, early intervention clinics, some in private practice, education settings in schools, and then there may be opportunities in other workplace settings. So for example, for organizational behavior management supervision. So organizational behavior management actually looks at workplaces and performance and how we can increase employee performance and happiness. Okay, so here's Beth. She is working part-time as a support worker. She absolutely loves her job and she'd love to continue to work there, but she's not sure if her job will be suitable for supervision. This organization that she works for doesn't have an on-site BCBA or CBA, and she's not really sure that if what the work that she does will be considered behavior analytics. So what should Beth do? Okay, so our advice for Beth is that in her setting, it's possible, but highly unlikely that many of her working hours will count towards supervision. In that setting, she'd be working in a very unsupported way potentially. So if we were to supervise her to be implementing things that would be a little bit outside her scope as a support worker, can leave her a little bit vulnerable. So there's potential risk there. So we would recommend that Beth seek out a full-time or part-time role with a supervisor in-house, or find a position as an entry-level behavior support practitioner or behavior therapist and seek external supervision. There are a number of roles that do have supervision that offer in-house supervision. There are also many roles that do not offer in-house supervision, but there's also external supervisors who are ready and happy to help you and support you towards your vision pathway. So luckily, Beth finds a role with a local behavior support service. The clinicians are highly experienced behavior support practitioners, but there are no BCBAs or CBAs. What does she need to do to commence supervision? What Beth needs to do, so she started her coursework, so that was tick number 1. She needs to secure a qualified supervisor, and then she also needs to make sure she has a supervision contract with each supervisor. So to find a supervisor, the best way to find a supervisor is you go onto that ABAA website, and it's a little bit tricky to find, but you go to resources for the public, find a specialist, and then BCBA, BCABA supervision. There are also often CBA supervisors as well there. And that's how, and there's a whole bunch of us listed on there. So you can, have a look and see who's there and get in contact. Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, some settings offer supervision from a BCBA or CBA as part of the role. Other settings do not, likely because they just don't have BCBAs or CBAs employed. Sometimes they do have BCBAs or CBAs, but they just don't have the capacity to supervise everyone. And just a reminder, if you do work in a setting with no supervisor, you will need external supervision if you want to go for the behavior analytic pathway. And there you go. The other thing to do is word of mouth. So it can be really helpful to talk to other, if you're in a university program at the moment, put a shout out onto any discussion boards or whatever, just find out some names of good supervisors. So that can be a really good way to find them as well. In terms of who can supervise who, we have got, do need to be careful, because if you're, for example, if you're wanting to do the BCBA certification, you can't be supervised by a CBA. You have to be supervised by a BCBA. Again, BCBAs can supervise everyone. CBAs can only supervise like for like or supervise CBAUs. Okay, so you just want to be checking to make sure what certification that person has. Also, if you're wanting to pursue BCBA certification, you cannot be supervised by the behavior support practitioner. Behavior support practitioners are wonderful, but they do need to have behavior analytic qualification. So either CBA for CBA certification or BCBA for BCBA and CBA certification. There are some psychologists. I don't think there are any of them in Australia who are not certified, but I did put that in there that technically they can supervise, but I don't think there's anybody in Australia at the moment who meets that requirement. So if you want BCBA, you need a BCBA supervisor. If you want CBA, you can get a BCBA or a CBA. And the other thing to remember is that they need to be in good standing. They need to not have any complaints pulled against them. If you're looking to work towards the BACB certification, they have to be a BCBA, as I said, good standing. They also need to have completed an 8-hour supervisor training. We can't have a dual relationship, so they can't be related to, subordinate to, employed by, or in a multiple relationship with the supervisee. So your partner can't supervise you, for example. Ideally, they have more than 1 year experience. If they have less than 1 year, then they should be supervised by someone else. So there should be a consulting supervisor involved. You should have a supervision contract. There is a template available on the BACB website. Basically, this outlines who is involved in the supervisory relationship and what activities will be included in supervision. And also remember, when we talked about the behavior analytics stuff, identifying what we're going to do together. I'm also outlining when I might not sign off on some hours. So there have been circumstances, not very many, where the supervisee hasn't met the requirements and I've had to not sign off on their hours because they haven't either met ethical requirements or minimum supervision standards. Really being clear and transparent, outlining all of those those contingencies, and then also your termination clause and specifying your ethics code adherence. As I mentioned before, the supervisory period is 1 month, and we mentioned it's so minimum of 20, maximum of 130, and 5% must be spent with a supervisor. And we can do videos, so we provide almost exclusively, in fact, at the moment, very exclusively, distance supervision, so telehealth supervision, and we do that via asynchronous video observation. So our supervisees record videos and we observe those videos and provide feedback, usually in the session as we're watching the video together. And then you have to complete a verification form, and these need to be completed in a timely way. So each month you look at how many hours you've accrued and you complete a form that stipulates those hours and how many supervision hours you've had. And you collect all of those forms together, and those forms then form the basis of your final verification form, which is what gets submitted with your application. Okay, the thing you need to be watching there is just the number of hours of independent fieldwork supervision, making sure that you're meeting that 5% requirement. So for example, here's just some activities that you might have. So let's just say you have a session with a client, there's no supervisor present. This would not count as a contact because there's no supervisor there. It would not count as an observation. It would not count as supervision because there's no supervisor there, but it would be independent hours. If you have that same session where a supervisor is present and they're giving you feedback, that would count as a contact, it would count as observation, it would count as supervision, but it would not count as independent. If you have a stakeholder meeting with no supervisor, again, it's just independent hours. If a supervisor watches a video of you, that counts as an observation, but it can't technically count as supervision. You have to be present for it to count as supervision. If your supervisor gives you written feedback, that doesn't count as actually counts as anything at all. It's just a nice thing for the supervisor to do. And then any kind of supervisions with the supervisor, so just sitting in a meeting talking, that counts as both contact and supervision. So remember, we've got 1,500 hours for CBA certification. If we did the math and you maximally accumulated 130 hours per month, you're looking at about 12 months. But this is incredibly unrealistic. I would definitely recommend that you aim for between 18 and 24 months. So especially those of you who may be working in settings where a certain portion of your week is spent doing non-behavior analytic, it's very unlikely you're going to accumulate 130 hours a month. On average, most of our supervisees who are in a full-time behavior analytics setting would be accruing between 80 and 90 hours per month. Education settings can take longer just because the workload often includes administrative tasks and teaching. So a lot of the teachers that we supervise have a class. And so the behavior analysis is something they do extra. So it can be a little bit of a slower process. My advice is don't rush, enjoy the experience, get as much information and spend as much time with the supervision as you can. But also a caution, don't take too much time. There's a 5-year time limit on from when you start supervision to when you need to finish supervision. What should you expect from your supervisor? They should know the supervision requirements and they should support you to apply them. So it shouldn't be on you to have to 100% look at the requirements. They can be really overwhelming. The supervisor should know this. This is why they would have done supervisor training. They should be practicing ethically and they should support you to practice ethically. They should demonstrate integrity, which means that if they've committed to doing something or sending you something or giving you something or emailing you something that they should be doing. Of course, everybody gets busy and things get missed all of the time. I am no angel by all means. However, generally speaking, if you are expected to do that, then the supervisor should be modeling good practice. Observing your practice frequently and across a variety of clients and settings, engaging in case conceptualization and scaffolding you in clinical decision making. Sometimes firefighting happens and it's a reality of the job, but just being very careful not to let it take over your whole supervision experience, because what that leads to is just not being very systematic and not covering all of the task list content that you need to cover, helping you to apply the theory, and they should be giving you lots and lots of feedback. And what should you be doing? You should be making sure that you read your guidelines. Although your supervisor should be able to guide you, make sure that you're skilled up as well. Read it again, put it under your pillow, sleep on it, read it again in the morning. Read the ethical codes for your desired certification. Practice applying them to situations. That's the best way to get to know your ethics code. Learn to value feedback as a reinforcer. I know feedback can be hard for some people. Embrace all the learning activities, and although firefighting needs to happen, just be aware of it as a supervisee as well. Make sure that you're steering your own learning experience and setting your goals and that you're achieving your goals as you go through. Keep swimming, but be mindful of burnout. Burnout's really common in this field, so just make sure that you're getting the support that you need from your supervisor and also in your workplace, if those two things are separate, to make sure that you're not going to burn out of the job before you even make sure that you're watching those soft skills. So they're not on the task list, but soft skills, interaction skills, learning how to demonstrate empathy and working with people with kindness, and yes, is really important as well. So now is the time. We are finished. I really want to thank you all very much for attending this session, watching me up until now. Thank you for coming live. I really do hope that I've given you a bit of confidence in launching yourself into this exciting new career. I do think that we're at a very exciting time here in Australia. Because we're a small field, we really have the opportunity to develop a field that is truly person-centered, human rights focused. A few of the leaders in our community in behavior analysis are really passionate about human rights and really passionate about how the science can be married with a human rights focus and really be just doing amazing outcomes for the participants and all the people that we work with. So I think it is a very exciting time. I'd like to thank you all very much for listening to me. So thank you, all of you watching the recording.